Welcome back. Example 3 is going to be super duper. So let's get started. Example 3, let's solve using the Pythagorean theorem first. So we're trying to find all the missing sides on my lovely right triangle. Okay, so side A and B, those are the two sides of the right triangle. Sorry, the right angle. So my two sides of the right angle is this one and this one. Alright, and then the hypotenuse, the c squared, is the side directly across from the right angle. So this will be the c. Okay, and since it is isosceles and it's a right triangle, guess what kind of triangle this is? It is a 45, 45, 90 triangle. Look at that. Which means if one side is 2 root 2, the other side will also be 2 root 2. Alright, well, let's set this thing up. Don't worry, I know it's going to look a little strange how it's set up, but I will explain how we multiply these radicals together and the numbers without the radicals. Okay, so I'm going to write it like this. So we have a squared, I'm going to write it like this for right now. So a squared, well, a is 2 root 2, and I'm going to write it like this to kind of explain how you deal with the radical and squaring that radical. Okay, and that will be squared. Plus b squared, well, b is also 2 root 2, so I'm going to write it the same way, so 2 root 2. I dropped my pen. Okay, so 2 root 2 squared, and that will equal c squared, which c squared is x squared. Okay, now, whenever you square a number, you multiply that number to itself. So I'm going to rewrite this as 2 root 2 times 2 root 2, plus 2 root 2 times 2 root 2, and then I'll explain how you deal with square roots and how to multiply two square roots together. Okay, so this will be, it's going to be a lot to write down. I'm going to try to write it small. Yeah, I knew I was going to run out of room. Shucks. Okay, sorry guys, I'm going to write it down here where I have more room. Sorry. I knew it wouldn't be enough room, and I tried it anyways. The demon cat's got the best of me, you guys. Alright, so we're going to have two things multiplied together plus two things multiplied together, and that will equal x squared. And all of these will have square roots in them. Okay. Alright, so we have 2 root 2 times 2 root 2. Let's see, 2 root 2 plus 2 times root 2. It's kind of confusing. Alright, so, sorry. I'm trying to color code to make it make as much sense as possible. Okay. Here we go. Alright, so we have 2 root 2 times 2 root 2. And then we'll have the same thing again. So whatever we get over here will be the same thing as what we get over there. Okay, now, when you guys multiply square roots together, you can only multiply the values on the outside of the square roots together and the values on the inside of the square roots together. So be very careful. So this first one right here will end up being 2 times 2. Since these are both on the outside of the square root, I can multiply them together. And since these 2's are both on the inside of the square root, that means I can multiply those two together inside of the square root. And it'll be the same thing over here. Okay, so since these 2's are both on the outside of the square root, I'm legally allowed to multiply them together. And since these 2's are both on the inside of the square root, that means I can multiply them together inside of the square roots. Okay, so we have to be very careful. You can multiply things together that don't have square roots, and you can multiply things together that have square roots. If you don't do that, then the demon cats will get you. So please don't do that, or I'll be highly concerned about your life. Okay, but anyways, let's multiply these together. So 2 times 2 is 2. So I'll have 2 root 2. Alright, sorry. Man, Miss Long, get your life together. Sorry, guys. 2 times 2 is not 2. 2 times 2 is 4. 2 times 2 is also 4. So I have 4 root 4. Plus 2 times 2 is 4. And then 2 times 2 is 4. And that will equal x squared. Alright, and guess what, you guys? What's the square root of root 4? Well, root 4 is 2. 2 times 2 is 4. Okay, and this is multiplying to the 4. So the square root of 4 is 2. So this will be like 4 times 2. Okay, so this will be like 4 times 2, because the square root of 4 is 2. Same thing over here, the square root of 4 is 2, and since these two are secretly multiplying, it'll be like 4 times 2. So plus 4 times 2. And that will equal x squared. Alright, 4 times 2 is 8. 4 times 2 is 8, which equals x squared. And I'm going to flip around the equation because I prefer to have my x come first. So I'm going to have x squared equals 8 plus 8 is 16. And then lastly, how do we undo a square? We do square root that thing. So I'm going to square root that thing on both sides. The square root will cancel out the squared, and you're left with x equals plus or minus, don't forget the plus or minus will appear, the square root of 16 is 4. And remember, in this problem, since we're dealing with the side length of a triangle, the only answer that will make sense is the positive 4. So the missing side of my right triangle is 4. Okay, so don't forget, when we multiply square roots together, you can only multiply the items on the outside of the square roots together and the items on the inside of the square roots together. Okay, and then when you have two items side by side, they are multiplying. That's why this ended up being 4 times 2. So there you go. So that's one way to solve. You can also solve using the ratios. So let's get started on the ratios. Okay, so the legs, those are the two sides of the right angle in the right triangle. So these two sides are the legs. The side across from the right angle is the hypotenuse. So let's set this bad boy up. So we have 1 over the leg, which is 2 root 2. And that will equal root 2 over the hypotenuse, which is x. Alright, let's start cross multiplying. So 1 times x gives me x, and this will equal the other way 2 root 2 times root 2. Alright, so like before, again, we can only multiply the numbers in front of the square roots together and the numbers inside of the square roots together. Well, I don't see a number in front of the square root, which means there's secretly a 1. Okay, so when I set this up, it'll be x equals, okay, I'm going to multiply these two together. So the 2 times the 1 are on the outside of the square root, so I can multiply those two together. And then it'll be square root of the two values inside of the square roots, which are the 2 and the 2. So I can multiply those two together inside of the square root. So the 2 and the 1 are on the outside of the square root, so I can multiply them together. And then the 2 2's underneath the radical, I can multiply those two bad boys together underneath my radical. Okay, so I'm left with x equals 2 times 1 is 2. And then 2 times 2 is 4. And guess what, you guys? Is the square root of 4 a perfect square? Heavenly hamburger, it totally is. So the square root of 4 is 2. And since these two are secretly multiplying, this is like 2 times the square root of 4 is 2. And 2 times 2 is 4. Look at that. If you guys see, we got the same answer again. Okay, and again, if you wanted to solve using sine, cosine, and tangent, you could, and you would also get 4. So there you go, you guys. Nice work.